Claire Casademont. 11 News Tonight.
This is the CBS Evening News. Bob Schieffer reporting. Good evening. Well, who would have thought just over a year ago, during the heat of last year's presidential campaign, when Republican candidate George Bush was pounding the Democratic candidate for being soft on defense, who would have thought that a year later it would be President Bush who would propose a massive cut in defense spending? But then who would have thought that the Iron Curtain might be going to collapse? Well, that seems to be happening, and we begin tonight with what that means at the Pentagon, where David Martin reports.
Faced with a double whammy of the federal deficit and the crumbling Soviet empire, Defense Secretary Cheney has ordered the armed services to come up with plans for cutting $180 billion out of the Pentagon budget over the next 5 years. As recently as this spring, Cheney's 5-year defense plan called for small but steady increases in spending. A $180 billion cut could mean a sharp reduction in the size of the military. For example, 18 active duty Army divisions reduced to 12. 14 carrier battle groups cut back to 12. Defense Department officials say Cheney has made no decisions about how much or where to cut, but he does believe there has been a fundamental change in the threat posed by the Soviet Union and its Warsaw Pact allies.
I would hypothesize that the likelihood that the Poles and the Hungarians and the East Germans would ever join their forces in an offensive military action against Western Europe is now pretty remote.
The magnitude of the cuts will depend in part on the signing of 2 arms control treaties, a START treaty cutting the number of nuclear warheads on both sides in half, and a conventional arms control treaty under which the Soviets would be required to withdraw 275,000 soldiers from Eastern Europe on top of the 50,000 Gorbachev already has promised to pull out. Gorbachev's so-called new thinking has radically altered the debate over defense spending.
This year is the last of the deficit-driven defense budgets. Next year will be the beginning of a series of Gorbachev-driven defense budgets.
Whatever cuts Cheney finally orders, it is clear the Bush administration has embarked on the most fundamental change in defense strategy since the end of the Vietnam War. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
The campaign for reform in hardline Czechoslovakia seems to be gaining momentum by the day. Protesters gathered again as human rights activists charged police beat a student to death during a bloody demonstration last night. Richard Threlkell now with that.
They were there again tonight in the heart of Prague, hundreds of students shouting for freedom. They placed candles to mark the spot on National Street where last night Czech police and paratroopers attacked demonstrators, injuring scores of them in the most violent protest demonstration here in 2 decades. There are those here who believe the attack on the demonstrators was a sign of the communist leadership's weakness.
It is isolated and it is almost bankrupt.
And frightened.
And frightened.
And the leadership knows that this time it cannot expect help from Moscow, which sent in troops and tanks to crush the budding Czech democracy during the so-called Prague Spring of 1968. It's significant that the young Czechs who are marching for freedom now are not burdened by that memory.
Most of last night demonstrators were the young people who were not crushed or depressed by Soviet invasion. That is the thing of the past. So this new generation is now coming on the scene of history.
Tonight, police were apparently under orders to go easy, checking papers and moving the crowds along if they grew too large. But they could not stop people from talking about the violence last night and about a call for a general protest strike later this month. These Czechs seem determined to fashion a new free Prague Spring of their own, and they are defying the government to stop them. As fast as the police snuffed out the candles on National Street tonight, they were lighting even more of them on the statue of St. Wenceslaus. Richard Threlkell, CBS News, Prague.
In communist Bulgaria, the pace of change has been downright astonishing. The biggest protest rally since World War II was held today, barely a week after Bulgaria's ruthless leader was forced out. Martha Teichner was there.
The numbers told the story. As many as 50,000 Bulgarians jammed a square in front of Sofia's most famous church for their first ever taste of free speech and free assembly, for their first ever chance to hear something other than the official Communist Party line. A sign of how new even the idea of a dissident movement is in Bulgaria was the fact that the demonstration wasn't supposed to be a protest against anything, but rather a show of support for Glasnost. It attracted 5 times the people who attended yesterday's party-sponsored rally, many of them more curious than committed.
This demonstration is first in my life. First in my life. I don't understand not what is now. I am very, very happy.
Most of the people, they don't know what to say and they don't know what to think. They don't know what's happening.
What they did know is that today it was all right to show what they feel about Todor Zhivkov, the old hardline Communist Party boss, who was dumped last week after controlling Bulgaria for 35 years. The crowd also showed what it thinks of Petr Mladenov, the new party leader. When one speaker accused him of being part of Zhivkov's old guard, the man was shouted down. In just 1 week, Mladenov has brought Gorbachev-style communism to Bulgaria. In an interview with French television, he even raised the possibility of free elections and unrestricted travel. So far, the Bulgarian people have found themselves scrambling to keep up with the massive changes that have come so abruptly from the top. But today it was evident they are learning fast. Martha Teichner, CBS News, Sofia.
European common market leaders held a quickly arranged summit on Eastern Europe tonight. Among other things, they're debating whether there's room in the continent's future for one unified Germany. Bill McLaughlin reports.
Emergency financial aid for Poland's struggling democracy was high on the agenda at tonight's dinner at the elegant Elysee Palace. But sources agree that the big question was what to do about East Germany. West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl is publicly committed to the reunification of Germany. That prospect gets polite applause, but it also deeply worries the other West European leaders. French President François Mitterrand, tonight's host, believes the problem can be solved by moving full speed ahead towards a Europe that is politically and economically united, making the unification of the two Germanys possible only in the broader context of a united Europe. Mitterrand is opposed by British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who views European unity as a threat to Great Britain's national sovereignty. But Mrs. Thatcher is increasingly isolated.
We must have a united European front, and the good thing is that, as far as I can make out, Washington also wants a united European front. That is rather new.
The Bush administration has begun sending discreet signals to Mrs. Thatcher, suggesting that what Western Europe needs now is more unity and not less. American diplomats tell CBS News that they worry that Mrs. Thatcher's obvious phobia about European unity is self-defeating, that it damages British influence within the European community and hence weakens a pro-American voice there. West Europeans are prepared to tackle the problem of the two Germanys with or without the British.
If Margaret Thatcher is not ready to come forward, we'll have to do it without her.
But the mood here tonight seemed to be one of compromise. The European leaders avoided a messy dispute by simply not talking about the possible reunification of Germany, at least publicly. Instead, Mitterrand said the European leaders had agreed to study setting up a development bank for the economic rebuilding of Eastern Europe, providing that governments there fully embraced political freedom. All of Europe, said Mitterrand, has a rendezvous with democracy. Bill McLaughlin, CBS News, Paris.
And still ahead on the CBS Evening News, late-night doings at the U.S. Capitol and raising the roof. When disaster strikes, they strike back.
That'll be a charge.
We interrupt this purchase for a reminder.
Don't forget, Santa.
'Tis the season to be choosy.
La, 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 la.
That's it.
So choose the card that actually pays you cash back for every charge. The Discover card.
That's a great idea.
You sure know how to pick them. It pays to Discover, the card that pays you back.
Shoot some slices, salad shooter. Shoot some shreds, salad shooter. Shoot some salad, shoot it fast, shoot it pretty, pretty salad shooter.
Presto Salad Shooter Slicer Shredder. Easier than a food processor. Just point and shoot slices right onto a salad. Shoot shreds right onto a pizza. Top a dessert, go a little nutty. Clean up easy, dishwasher safe. Small enough to store anywhere. Now a cordless rechargeable Salad Shooter 2 from Presto.
Victor Kayam, what's the ultimate shaving gift?
The Remington Microscreen Ultimate. It's 2 screens, shave as close as the blade, or your money back. No other shaver makes that promise.
Now I know why he bought the company.
Remington.
This is new Hellman's cholesterol free.
Will I like it?
It has 0% cholesterol.
Will I like it?
It tastes 100% Hellman's.
I like it.
I knew you'd like it.
I knew I'd like it.
New Hellman's cholesterol free with half the fat. Bring out the best.
More than 1 million East Germans crossed into West Germany today on this second weekend without the wall, and it was obvious the novelty has not worn off. Eric Engberg has the story.
There was plenty of elbow room in Magdeburg, East Germany today. Its people were gone, 50 miles down the road to Helmstadt, West Germany, indulging their newfound right to give capitalist materialism a whirl.
It's very nice to see it, to see the West, the Golden West.
In Leipzig, center of anti-communist foment, there were signs all this sightseeing and shopping was taking some of the pressure off the beleaguered government. Between 5,000 and 10,000 people showed up for a rally demanding free elections. That was far short of expectations. In Berlin, things went more smoothly than last week. East Germans left their cars at the border, turning the once fearsome wall into a humble parking lot. The visitors jammed the streets and stores, mostly looking, often in wonderment. West German businessmen like Klaus Engeln, sales manager for a large department store chain, worry the East German crush will hurt business during the lucrative Christmas season.
Christmas is traditionally the strongest profit-making time of the year. We make 25% of our yearly profit in the last 6 weeks. That's why it's so important for us that it goes without a problem.
East Berliners can't afford big-ticket items. West Berliners who can are being scared away from the stores. The huge income difference between East and West is an economic barrier just as daunting as the wall. An old German drinking song, sung today in Helmstadt, asks, who can pay? Who has the money? West Germans are now asking that question as they contemplate the next steps in their unfolding relationship with the East. Eric Engberg, CBS News, West Berlin.
One of the men behind the freedom movement in the Eastern Bloc is visiting the United States. Solidarity Chairman Lech Walesa was in Chicago today, and he felt right at home. Gary Reeves reports.
The blustery Chicago cold could not chill the welcome prepared for Lech Walesa by the world's largest Polish community outside of Poland.
All the Polish people feel like it's part of Poland here. So they want to come, they want to join, they want to almost cry, you know, just to show how happy they are.
Here beats the heartbeat of America.
W mieście wspaniałych I ciężko pracujących ludzi.
In this magnificent city of hard-working people.
While the welcomes in Chicago for Walesa have been warm, his real business here in Chicago is exactly that, business, convincing Americans to invest in the Polish economy.
So I'm asking you to lead us onto the road of development.
Last night, the U.S. Senate voted almost $1 billion in aid for Poland and Hungary. Today, the states of Illinois and Michigan chipped in with $35 million more, making this visit a profitable one indeed.
We believe there will be other investors lining up to invest in this man and this country.
The wall falls and freedom reigns in Eastern Europe.
And Walesa is getting credit for starting it all, something Poles and non-Poles alike appreciate.
I'm one who likes to take in history, and I wanted to be down here and witness it personally.
Chicago's nearly 1 million Poles have been preparing for this visit for months. At meeting after meeting, they sang, they kissed, and they showered Walesa with gifts.
My head is too big for that.
Walesa claims to be just a small part in the revolution sweeping Eastern Europe. But to Poles in Chicago, he remains larger than life, a leader and a hero. Gary Reeves, CBS News, Chicago.
In Yugoslavia, a fire burned out of control tonight inside a coal mine where 91 miners died yesterday in a methane gas explosion. Experts recommended 5 years ago that the mine be closed as unsafe. Near Maxton, North Carolina, an early morning fire destroyed a mobile home. 9 people were killed there, including 8 children. Officials believe the fire may have been touched off by a kerosene heater. And the first of the funerals was held today for victims of an elementary school disaster in Newburgh, New York. 7 children were killed this week when a tornado knocked down a cafeteria wall, burying the youngsters under brick and glass.
Is that all there is? It's kind of simple, isn't it? You sure all the good stuff hasn't sunk to the bottom? Well, where's the buried treasure? There's no mystery. Sip. This is just flakes. Mmm. I can actually taste the cereal. It doesn't need anything else.
Kellogg's Corn Flakes.
Corn Flakes?
Taste them again for the first time. And for a limited time, taste them again for just 99 cents.
When Mom gets a cough and cold, everyone suffers.
Mom, Dad's ironing.
Time to doctor that cough with Robitussin.
Look, Mom's feeling better.
Robitussin, recommended by more doctors, pharmacists, and Dr. Mom.
It's 32 degrees. And Jan Trumpeter is learning all about her antifreeze. The hard way.
What is happening to me?
Don't push your luck. Guarantee it with Advanced Formula Prestone.
Our Volunteer of the Year is Doris Craig.
It's terrific how Dept changes people's lives. And now there is a terrific change in Dept elastic leg undergarments. It's called AbsorbLock, a unique leakage protection system that locks in 25% more. It'll do wonders for your confidence and get you back into life. Thank you so much.
Get back into life with Dept.
Now with AbsorbLock protection.
As the old saying goes, the lights burned late at the U.S. Capitol last night. In fact, it was about 2 this morning when House Speaker Tom Foley sharply rapped his gavel.
The House will be in order. The chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Senate.
And what was this message that arrived in the early morning hours when good little legislators are usually fast asleep?
Clerk will report the title.
An act to amend the rules of the House of Representatives and the Ethics and Government Act of 1978 to provide for government-wide ethics reform and for other purposes.
It was the other purposes, of course, that kept everyone up and awake, because that was the part that raised congressional salaries. After a week of maneuvering, cajoling, and orating, the House had voted itself a 30% pay raise to be spread out over the next 2 years. In return, House members will give up income from outside speaking engagements. Earlier in the evening, the leadership of both parties had tried to push through a similar raise in the Senate. But midway through one of the most acrimonious evenings ever there, support for a big pay boost melted away.
It has become apparent that a majority of members of the Senate are opposed to the amendment.
That's when Senate leaders cobbled together a plan for a smaller increase of only 10%, which also allows senators to continue collecting some outside income from speaking engagements. That passed.
And I would hope that people understand this is a cost of living adjustment. It's not a pay raise.
Whatever it was, it set tempers flying. A Republican accused his colleagues of secretly wanting a raise but being afraid to vote for it.
I watch these ringing speeches and know that guy in his craven bosom is just waiting to hope that the rest of us will go off the cliff and they'll draw the check.
But it was the senior Democrat in the Senate, Byrd of West Virginia, who accused his colleagues of the ultimate Senate sin, conceding that they were inferior to members of the House, who will now draw higher pay.
And we have created, by virtue of our cowardice and inequity, we're saying we're not worth as much as our colleagues in the other body.
Next week, of course, the senators will all be friends again. But by 1991, when the raises go into effect, House members' pay, along with that of federal judges and senior government officials, will be boosted to almost $121,000. Senators will be making around $97,000 a year. It's one of the few times in history that members of the House have been paid more than senators.
We're here to gently remind you that you can depend on your mom.
Phillips Milk of Magnesia, the laxative for dependable overnight relief that contains no harsh irritants.
So it's gentle.
Nobody treats you better than Phillips Milk of Magnesia.
Mom knows best. Leave it to Mom.
Pulsing, throbbing pain. When doctors were asked what they take more often for their everyday pain, Tylenol, extra-strength Tylenol, Advil, or Bayer, more doctors take Bayer. For pain, Bayer is the wonder drug that works wonders.
And we'll stay on strike till we get a fair contract.
Now for the latest developments on the story that has Capitol Hill up in arms.
We're not going to try to control what our people read and say and think.
A government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I prefer the latter.
Mark my words, the end of the world is at hand. The end is near. I've about had it.
The freedom to say and think what we believe, to express our individuality and diversity. That's our birthright, and it's ensured by this document. Join us and the National Archives in celebrating the 200th anniversary of the Bill of Rights.
More than 1,000 Salvadorans who live in Southern California marched today to MacArthur Park in Los Angeles. They were protesting Thursday's brutal killing of 6 Jesuit priests at a Roman Catholic university in San Salvador. The Salvadoran protesters blamed a right-wing death squad. There was a memorial service for the 6 priests today in San Salvador for thousands of refugees. Problems are mounting after a week of fighting between the U.S.-backed army and the leftist rebels. Ron Allen.
As fighting continues in towns transformed into battlefields, Red Cross workers transport the wounded, civilians caught in the middle. Crowds of people gather their meager possessions and flee their homes. This woman left her children to search for food before the evacuation began. Now she cannot go back to find them. The streets in some towns, like this one in Soyapango, have become seas of white flags. But neither the army nor the rebels recognize the people's plea for a truce. Army gunships seek out rebel targets as evacuees watch the aerial show from a downtown stadium that has become a refugee shelter. It is crowded and uncomfortable. This man says he came because he couldn't stand much more of the bombing. It's better to leave everything behind than to die, he says. Most of these people arrived here from the outskirts of the capital where the fighting is heaviest. There is little food or water. Many of them cook what they can over open fires and spend their time sitting on the hard concrete waiting for the war to end. She says they need food and medicine. We came from one place where we were suffering to another where we are also suffering. She is most concerned about the children. Some of them are sick. All of them are learning early that war is a way of life here.
A total of nearly 1,000 Army soldiers and guerrillas have been killed, according to figures released by the government. But no one can yet determine the number of civilians who have died in the rubble or which side is responsible.
That question hung over mourners at a mass today for 6 Jesuit priests and 2 female employees who were murdered Thursday. An investigator for the Catholic Church claims to know who is responsible.
We know who did that, of course, we know.
But she says solving the murders depends on the cooperation of the Salvadoran government. To make sure that happens, U.S. investigators have been called in to review the case. Ron Allen, CBS News, San Salvador.
That you have dry skin. I mean, you're born with it. You're a girl with it. You know you have dry skin. I tried this dry skin product, and it was amazing because right away I felt the difference. It was completely unique. It felt like this is made for my skin. Time release. I don't know. It just works all day. It just feels normal now and comfortable. and soft, my skin.
Introducing new Oil of Olay Intensive Moisture Complex.
This isn't ordinary. This is, it's just very special.
Tickets for Webb?
We interrupt this purchase for a reminder. The Discover card actually pays you cash back for every charge.
I hope you like this.
It pays to Discover.
There's an enemy in your car's engine, cold. That's why you need the special quality of Pennzoil motor oil. Pennzoil has the right pumpability to flow faster and protect your engine. Conquer the enemy cold with the world-class protection of Pennzoil.
If you think oat bran cereals are the way to go for overall nutrition, we're about to turn the tables on you. A leading consumer magazine just rated Nabisco shredded wheat ahead of all the leading oat bran cereals in nutritional value. That's how much fiber, protein, vitamins, and minerals per calorie we have and how little sugar and fat.
Gee, thanks.
And that should turn your ideas about nutrition around to Nabisco shredded wheat.
Washington's Redskins defensive end Dexter Manley was banned from the National Football League today after his third violation of drug abuse rules. Manley can apply for reinstatement a year from now. Traffic flowing across the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge for the first time since part of the upper roadway collapsed during last month's earthquake. Police cars and tow trucks today led the way as the bridge was officially reopened last night. After disasters like the earthquake, government can provide only so much relief. But victims of Hurricane Hugo in the Carolinas have found that they can get help from a group of volunteers who believe charity begins at home. Aaron Hayes reports.
For the third time since the earthquake hit, Oakland choirs have traveled to a shelter for those pushed out of their houses. The hope to raise spirits, even for a little while. 2,800 miles away in Charleston, South Carolina, Susie Ladson couldn't afford to fix her house, devastated by Hurricane Hugo.
And if I'd been able, I'd try to do myself, but I ain't not able.
She wasn't able, but the group Raise the Roof was. Using volunteers and donated materials, Raise the Roof has made temporary repairs to Susie's house and more than 300 others here. The inspiration for that project and for the Serenade in Oakland came from Mississippi. 20 years ago, Mississippi was hit by Hurricane Camille. Recovery was difficult, disorganized, and depressing, until someone stuck an American flag on a pile of debris and the idea caught on.
As a symbol of defiance, that we're down, but we're not licked.
Wade Guys learned from Camille and took his post-hurricane lessons to South Carolina, where he taught them the key to recovery is self-help, lifting spirits, and a strong symbol. Linda Lombard was convinced.
That flag means that we are together, that we Americans hang tight and we hang together and we help each other.
Raise the Roof volunteers in South Carolina now raise a small American flag at every house they repair.
It just shows that the country sticks together. When there's a disaster, people come in and do what they can to help.
In Oakland, there is talk now of going beyond raising spirits and constructing a Raise the Roof campaign of their own.
Sociologists and psychologists say that tragedy seems to bring out the worst in people. Believe me, that is not true. It brings out the very best.
It's important, Guy says, to keep people looking ahead, looking for ways to help each other get through. An old idea getting new use these days. Aaron Hayes, CBS News, Charleston, South Carolina.
And that's the news. Later tonight on Saturday Night with Connie Chung, laws that allow minors to get abortions without their parents' consent. I'm Bob Schieffer, CBS News in New York. Good night.
Two teams that love to hit with two guys who love to run. Herschel and the Vikings, Randall and the Eagles. A hit-and-run collision tomorrow.
This is CBS.
Next on